Hey guys, it's Katie. I'm going to show you what the herb garden looks like. It's started growing really well, and things are just taking off. So I took some clips of drying some herbs, but I lost a few clips. So this is kind of an intro to that video, but I wanted to show you. This is all parsley, and I've harvested off of it a lot. I use it in so much, like pretty much every recipe. I try to find a way to put parsley in it. And so I harvested some of this to dry. This here is oregano. It's coming back from where I harvested it, and all that is oregano. So I'm actually going to take another cutting of oregano and dry it again, but you'll see how I do that in the video. And then this is sage. I cut it way back. If you saw my, I think I called it spring herb garden maintenance video, you'll see it was much larger, but it was already sprouting from the base. I should have cut it back in the fall, but I just cut it back. Keeps it more compact and just makes it look nicer, and you kind of want the fresher growth. It just looks nicer, the leaves are less damaged, and it's just nicer to use for cooking. So the leaves that I took off when I trimmed it back, I dried those as well. These are thymes. This is a lemon thyme. I got it to replace a thyme that I killed by pruning it too aggressively, which is kind of hard. You can really prune these things back a lot, but I did kill my thyme. I ended up replacing it with this lemon thyme because I thought it looked cool. It's not as all-purpose of a flavor profile as I would like for my thyme. It would be nice for like chicken or fish, but not so much for beef. So my mom has a big thyme plant, so I just kind of took a chunk off and have just transplanted that. So I'm not going to be drying thyme in this video, but you do it just the same way. I'm going to let that get established before I harvest off of that. I also trimmed back my rosemary, and like I said, it just kind of cuts it back, lets it start from fresh, and the new growth just looks nicer, easier to use. It's not so damaged looking. If you can see on that one, some of the tips are just yellow, and that's just from overwintering. So if you kind of cut that back and let it sprout new from the base. Now rosemary's a little trickier. Everything else I pretty much chop back in the fall. The rosemary I do in the spring, and you do it less aggressively for the rosemary is what I've found to work best. These are all chives. These last through the whole season for the most part. You'll even get blossoms later on. I have not dried chives. I guess I could, and maybe I will for this video. We'll see. But so far I have clips of drying sage, parsley, oregano. And like I said, the thyme is the same way. So I'll just insert those clips of that next so you can see how to dry herbs. Super easy. Anybody can do it. Alright, so I was just going to try to harvest some to dry them. And I'm seeing there's already a flower forming. So these will go to flower. These are the previous flower stalks. But they'll go to flower. You can use the flowers and the leaves. So generally I use chives to give a freshness. So like I said, I haven't ever reached for dry chives, but we'll try it just for this video to see how well they turn out. Same with the rosemary. I don't like the texture of dried rosemary. So yeah, I've never dried it, and I don't use it dried. So it does last throughout the whole year. It just looks a little nicer in the springtime. But yeah, I could dry it the same way. So what I like about harvesting in the spring is all this is new growth, and it's all very tender still, so you can pick them just like flowers. If you pick it later in the season, these stems get woodier, and so it'd probably be less damaging to the plant to use like scissors to cut them. But yeah, when you get it in the springtime like this, it's just super tender. And I got myself a whole little bouquet. I'll do a second round of dried oregano. I got the chives. I cut back the sage, but you could do the same thing when it's new fresh growth. You can just pick it. You see the older growth is kind of woody, so if it's on older growth you would want to use scissors, otherwise pulling on the stems might just break like a whole chunk off. So there's that, and same thing with the parsley. A lot of what the parsley that I harvest is the seed stalks and anything on the side here. So if I pulled this up, any of these leaves I could save and dry. Let's see if it will focus. Right there is the seed head. There we go. So each of those little balls will open up and make a seed. We're going to try to extend that and not do it just yet. But you could come through and take any of this and just, like I said, just pick it like a flower, bring it in, and we'll show you what to do next. All right, so here's the oregano that I picked, and you want to wash it, you want to take the leaves off the stem, and you want to dry it. And you can kind of do it in different orders depending on how you want to do it. So what I do is I wash it first while it's still on the stem. I find that easier. Then I take the leaves off the stem and then I dry them. If you wanted to, you could take the leaves off and then wash just the leaves and then you can dry them. Or you could wash the stems and then you dry them and then you take the leaves off the stems. So it just depends on how you want to do it. There's kind of pros and cons to all of it. So what I do is I wash them while they're still on the stem. It just keeps things kind of together. And then I take the leaves off the stem. So these I actually just washed. All I do is, I'll show you. I just put water in, cold water. And just like I'm washing greens or something, I fill it up with cool, clear water. I just kind of do this. And like I said, these didn't have much dirt on them. I grew them, so I know there's nothing, I don't spray anything on them. So I'm just getting little bits of any dust or stuff that may have landed on them, or a bug or bird poop or something like that might have landed on them. But visually they didn't look too dirty, and I know they don't have any chemicals sprayed on them. So just do that, drain away the water, and you can do that however many times you need to do to feel good about them. But like I said, I already washed those actually, so they're clean. And then from there you can just take the stems and dry them like this, and then take the leaves off. I like to take the leaves off and then dry them. And the reason I like to do that, you can see I have started here a little bit. I find that I get a lot less stem in my final product. And so it takes longer to do it this way, but I just sit here while I'm doing something else, or while I'm listening to my daughter read, or anything that you watching TV, anything that you're doing that you can just sit here and pick leaves off. It's not like it takes all of your mental energy. And also, if you want to dry them, then take the leaves off, you can, but the stem becomes more brittle, and as you're pulling off the leaves, it's more likely that you'll get little bits of stem. But it's generally faster because it's dry. All you have to do is you kind of like crush it, and the good leaves fall through, but a little bit of stem will too. So I just like to take a little bit of the extra time. And like I said, I do, for my oregano at least, I do it all up front once a year. So I just do this, pull all the stems off, or all the leaves off. Sometimes I leave like the super little ones because I have so much of it growing out there. I can just basically choose the very best leaves, pluck them off, and then the stems I throw in the garbage. I don't compost those because, like I said, this is an invasive. And as you saw, the runner that set down roots, the same thing can happen. So if you put this in your compost, it could cause oregano to kind of grow wild in your compost. So I make sure I throw those in the garbage can. So these leaves are pretty wet, so they're sticking to my fingers. I mean, you saw I just poured water on them. But usually I will wash them and let them sit and sort of air dry for a couple hours, or even till the next day, depending on what time it is that I bring them in and what else I have going on. And so they'll be a little drier than this, and they won't stick to my fingers as much. And it makes the job a little quicker when they're not wet, but we'll get this taken care of. Okay, and I don't use a dehydrator for my herbs. I find that it turns things black. They'll still probably have a good flavor, but I don't like the way that they look. And I don't like having my dehydrator running on my counter, making noise, using electricity, and taking up my counter space when all I have to do is put the leaves on a plate and just let them air dry. It takes longer, but they just sit there. Find a place out of the way and let them dry. If I wasn't going to pull the leaves off and I was just going to dry the stems, if your stems are big enough for certain herbs, you can just bunch them up, and people hang them, you know, wherever you have an open place. But since these are kind of short little stems, it would be hard to bunch them. But if I wasn't going to take the leaves off and they're little short stems like this, I would just drain as much water as this. I might even throw them on a towel and kind of dry them. I actually could do that to dry these a little bit to make them easier to pick. And then I would just pile them up on the plate and do the same thing. Dry them the same way, just on the stem. All right, so this is a perfectly clean dish towel, hand towel. And I'm just pat it. Try to get some of that extra moisture off. See if that helps. Helps with the picking process. And I'm just throwing them on the plate. I will spread them out when I'm done. They don't have to be exactly a single layer. The more even, like the more singular the layer is, the faster they'll dry, of course. But if they're kind of on top of each other, it'll be fine. As they dry, they'll shrink back a little bit. And over the course of the few days or week that it takes to dry, I just go through and kind of mix them around with my fingers when I think of it when I'm walking past them. All right, and this one I picked, but it doesn't look great. You can see they got black spots on them, so I'm just gonna skip that altogether. Like I said, I have plenty to work with here. I'm considering using the stems for an herbal vinegar I've never done before, but that would be an option. Depending on the herb, you could also use those for stock. A little goes a long way with herbs in stock if they're cooked. Ideally, you would add your herbs to your finished like soup or whatever you're using the stock in. So just be very careful. If you put too much herbs in, especially resinous herbs like this oregano, they can overpower really quickly. But you could, if you were making pizza sauce, since you normally throw oregano in that, a lot of times if I need some oregano, I don't have any dried, or I want to save my dried for something else, I'll grab a bunch like this and throw it in the pizza sauce, and then I just scoop it out with a spoon, and I don't even worry about taking it off or drying it or anything like that. So if you had a bunch of these stems, I mean, there's still plenty of leaves and plenty of flavor in that, so you could use that. I already try not to waste too much and try to think of uses for all my scraps, and the way things are going, seems like I want to do it more and more. Everything has a purpose. Use everything to its fullest potential. And I'm just plucking individual leaves off. Some people will take the stem and pull the leaves backwards down the stem. These oregano stems, because they're fresh, new, tender stems, it'll just break. If this was more of a woody stem, you could do that. You can do that like on rosemary. It has a more of a woody stem. So you can try it, but it tends to be more frustrating for me than just picking it off leaf by leaf. You also will more likely get bits of stem and other bits of stuff that you don't want in there, like the petiole, the little stem that goes between the leaf and the main stem. And they can sometimes be tough, so you just have to decide if it's worth it to you or not. All right, so this was just a small amount, but you can see it made a nice little pile of leaves. I just look through, make sure there's nothing that's a stem or anything that needs to be taken out, and then I just spread it out like that. And you can see it's not a single layer, but it is spread out. Let's see there. It's got a little bit of stem, so I would just take that off. You don't have to be as picky as me. I'm pretty picky. I would say I am pretty picky when it comes to it, but I've gotten plenty of herbs that were full of stems, and it makes me mad. So if I'm doing it myself, I'm not going to put stems in it. All right. So then I just set it somewhere. Anywhere that I have space, on top of a toaster, or like on top of my toaster oven, on top of your microwave, if your microwave's not installed in your cabinets like mine is. Let's see. I might put mine over here. Generally, I don't put anything over it. If I had like a dog in the house and dog hair was a concern getting on him, I would lay loose weave, thin, light cloth over it, or a paper towel, whatever you have. But generally I don't. All right, I also have some parsley. I don't usually dry parsley. I have heard that it turns black, and parsley's really cheap. I buy it usually at a farm store near my house, and I can get it for pretty cheap, so I generally just get that. But since we have it here, I will wash it up. These are a lot of those stems that were the seed going up to seed, and if you can see, the leaves look a little different than usual, but they still have flavor and they can still be used. And then I have some regular stems of this Italian parsley, so I'm going to wash this and I will take it off of the stems. Take the leaves off and just do the same thing, leave them on the plate. And we'll see if they turn black. I never really checked for myself. That's what I heard, and I never felt the need to do it, so I never did it, but we'll try it. We'll both learn something today. And these stems have a ton of flavor, and these are good for stock. It's not so much of a resinous herb, and parsley is great in stock. You don't want to go too crazy, but it's a good flavor. So I'm saving those. You can also, if they're tender enough, chop them up and put them in eggs is really good. Parsley stems are good for lots of things. Same with cilantro. Never throw your cilantro stems out. Cilantro stems have all the same flavor as the cilantro leaves, and then you can save your cilantro leaves for the garnish. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to lay it out and see how this turns out. And these are kind of whole leaves, and like the oregano was mostly whole leaves. Some of them got torn up just in the process of picking them. But I want to leave them as whole as possible. Once they're dry, I pack them up, and when I use them, I just kind of crunch them up with my fingers. So we'll see if that works the same for this. All right, so there is the sage. I'll just spread it out, just set this to the side, and just let it air dry. Simple as that. All right, so this is what I did for these garlic chives. I did mince some up. And again, I didn't make sure they're in a perfectly singular layer. Hopefully they'll kind of shrink up a little bit. And then I decided to try some whole. I might put the whole on a separate plate. This does seem just a touch full. But that's what I'm going to do for drying the garlic chives. Hey guys, so it's been about 24 hours since I put these on here. And I don't know if you remember, you probably remember better than me, because for me it was yesterday and for you it was probably 4 seconds ago. But this plate was kind of like mounded up with some oregano leaves, and I just set them on my counter, and this is what they look like 24 hours ago. They're like, none of them are really touching. They're social distancing, these leaves. So you can see they've shrunk up quite a bit, and they're still pliable, and they're not like crispy or dry, but I do like the look of how it's going. Everything looks good, and the shrinkage is what I would expect for this, since I've done this most frequently. So it's just gonna take a few more days. I have it sitting over there on my my rack where I keep my cast iron pans. Here's what the parsley looks like. It looks wilted, but it doesn't look like it has shrunk at all. It's like wilted and flattened, but it doesn't look like the individual leaves have shrunk up very much, and I don't know if it's going to take a significantly longer time. I don't know. We'll have to see. And just, go through and toss it like this so anything that's underneath might get the top air, and you know what I'm talking about. We'll just keep an eye on it, check it again. So here's where I have them. I have this rack for my cast iron, so it keeps it kind of out of the way and can stack them up so it doesn't take up a bunch of horizontal space. But yep, sitting that one there, and this one I had the oregano at the top and this at the bottom, so I don't know, I just switched them in case maybe there's a different airflow. Okay, so these are the chopped up chives. This is just one day later, and they are fully dry. I was afraid that because they were cut and they would be kind of turned dark, or the edges, they looked a little dark when they were freshly cut, but they dry pretty nicely here. The whole ones are still quite fresh and not dry at all. So yeah, I don't know if it would be worth it to dry them whole and then crumble them because it does such a good job to cut them up ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and package this up. Here's the oregano. I have everything here, and I'm just going to put it in some reusable spice jars. Like the ones I have I got from IKEA, but you can just reuse other spice jars or mason jars or whatever. I'll show you what it looks like when they're all packaged up. Alright, so here is the final product for the oregano. This is about a week later, and these have been plenty dry. I could have packed them up a long time ago, but they were just sitting there. So I will store these in a little glass jar just like this. Here is the parsley. It turned out a lot better than I thought. Some are pretty yellow, but they may have just been yellow when I picked them. So I would probably take these few out. So these two, you know, maybe a few here and here. Maybe pick out the ones that are a little more yellow. But yeah, overall I'm very happy with that. This is the sage. And again, I will just store this whole. So here you can kind of see the store-bought compared to the home-dried, and the color retention is really nice. The texture looks really nice. I'm pretty happy with how the parsley's turned out. So there you can see what they look like. The jars aren't full, but I did get quite a bit out of each of them, and again I will be doing this continuously through the spring so I can continue to add to this. I haven't labeled these jars yet, but I will be doing that just in a minute. I want to make sure that you labeling your jars because sometimes it's hard to tell them apart when they're dry like this. So label them, put the date on them, and then enjoy them. If you have any questions about drying herbs, leave them in the comments below. I'll try to answer what I can. If you enjoyed the video, learned something from it, give the video a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, share it with anybody you think it might be useful for, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!